When was a time you legitimately thought you were going to die? A couple friends and I were driving home from a birthday party, and we got rear-ended by a drunk driver who was going about 120 on impact. All of the windows exploded, and the tires caved inwards, and we were going about 70, so there was a sort of slingshot effect, where the impact made us pick up some speed and we were just careening down the freeway with zero control. The car swerves around a bunch, almost hits another car and a pole, and eventually the car rolls into an area just right of the shoulder. Luckily it ended up back upright on the tires, but it ended up facing the complete opposite direction we were initially going. We thought our friend in the backseat was dead, but she was just unconscious and ended up having some pretty bad whiplash. My other friend and I were basically unharmed except for some cuts and bruises. We all probably should died for sure. I was really sick when I was 12. Missed a whole semester of school. I was throwing up every day and had no energy. Doctors couldn't figure it out. Had test after test, visited specialist after specialist, and nothing. All we did know is my liver wasn't functioning. I was pretty jaundiced. I was pretty sure I would die before we knew what was wrong. It's hard to explain, but I came to terms with it. Like I was more comfortable with death as a concept when I was 12 than I'm now at 25. Turns out it was my gallbladder. They had checked it for gallstones early on, but that wasn't the issue. My particular malfunction didn't show up on an ultrasound. The bile duct into my stomach didn't form correctly from birth, and it was hindering complete bile drainage, leading to sepsis in my gallbladder/liver. 1 surgery and 2 weeks bed rest, and I was back to normal. Back in July I was riding my motorcycle and was turning into my driveway. A girl came from behind me around a sharp turn and T-boned me. She was going at least 60 miles per hour up until a couple seconds before impact when she hit her brakes. She hit me because she was either texting or dicking around with something in her car. Either way, she wasn't paying attention. I remember hearing tires screeching and seeing the car half a second before impact, then everything went black. I broke the windshield with my head, broke the mirror with my hip, then landed face first on the road. I do remember being scared because I wasn't sure if there were more cars, so adrenaline kicked in, and I caught myself with my hands and knees and pushed myself to my feet to run off the road. That's where I regained my vision. The bike was totaled, but thanks to my helmet and pure rage at being hit, I managed to literally walk away with only a concussion, nasty bruises, and a deep bone bruise on my left foot. No broken bones at all. It's been 8 months, and I'm still recovering from the concussion. My toe barely hurts, and the leg that took the impact has a dent in the muscle, but other than that I'm fine. If I wouldn't have been wearing a helmet, then I have no doubt that I would be dead now. Wear your damn helmets, kids. The 5th of October 2019, rear-ended by a dump truck. In a coma for 42 days, and am now paralyzed. So sorry to hear this. How are you? T2 T3 vertebra break. Cord crushed but not severed. Can't walk but never say never. I have a great support system, so I'd say I'm lucky. Hit a stopped car going over 65 miles per hour. Spent 2 years in a wheelchair. 6 months of that was learning to walk again. Honestly thought I was going to die in the seconds before impact. I can still clearly see the people in the other car, the other traffic around us. Car was stopped to turn on a highway with no middle turning lane. I was the only one injured though, and I'm still sort of grateful for that, because I swear there was a kid in the backseat of the other car. I wasn't the driver, front seat passenger of a reckless driver. I was on vacation this past summer, was staying at a friend's house when I started to notice my chest feeling tight. I started to get a fever and feel sick. I threw up, and the feeling in my chest started to expand. It felt like it was going to explode, like a balloon being inflated inside me. I couldn't stand it. I literally felt like at any moment my heart would give out, or my chest would explode. Went to the emergency. Turns out I had a really bad gallbladder attack. But on the drive to the hospital I was telling my wife how much I love her lol, and that if she remarries don't let it be anyone we currently know, hahaha. Some dick pulled a revolver on me while at a party. Turns out it was one of those decommissioned ones with a cemented barrel and cylinder, but I didn't know at the time, and it was fucking scary. What a dumbus. That's a good way to get shot. Yeah, never point a gun at someone you don't intend to shoot. Common sense and gun etiquette 101. A friend and his girlfriend came to my house from a trip from Peru. They told me if they could come in. I was living with my grandparents. Once, we are in my room, he pulls a gun. I didn't know much about how guns worked back then. He cocks the gun, pulls out the magazine, points at me, and pulls the triggers. Turns out he was pulling the hammer, so the bullet wasn't shot. However, it scared the living shit out of me. That dude's not a friend. Chambering around and pointing it at someone and pulling the trigger isn't a fun game. If his finger slipped, or had there been more pressure, or any other number of things, he could have killed you. So this is funny, but also serious and disgusting, so I hope you have a strong stomach. I was sick, pooping my brains out, intense cramps, blood, vomit, migraines for days. It got to the point I was shitting water, crystal clear water. I thought I was poisoned somehow. Severely dehydrated as every fluid I drank just went through me like a funnel, or came back up minutes later. I stuck to water because it wasn't as gross as curdled milk. I lived on the toilet. One day I was sitting there sick as all hell, my new normal, or so I thought. I start physically heating up, heart palpitations, turned pale, fainted, fell off the toilet still shitting and vomiting. Fortunately I felt just right so I didn't choke on my own vomit. When I came to, still feeling faint, I take in my surroundings. There on the floor, there's pink butt water on my wall, laundry basket, and on half the floor seeping under me, there's vomit. Basically just stomach acid and water at this point on the other half of my floor and all over half my head. I was home alone, my parents were working, and my brother was asleep, and he sleeps hard. A bomb could go off, and he wouldn't know. Anyways, fluids just don't stop coming. I can't feel my legs, and I have no idea where my phone is, so I start shouting in between dry heaves, and, well, Poseidon crawling out of my throat. Luckily my neighbors heard me and called an ambulance. That ride was hell for every single one of us. My poor EMTs had to go home, shower, and I'm sure get tested for whatever it was I had, all while hoping they weren't gonna die. Fast forward to hospital, they give me meds to stop stomach spasms and anti-nausea medications along with pain meds for my acid-ridden esophagus and sore muscles. After all the tests, turns out I had the flu, not the scary part, and no electrolytes. Back to the only having water after a point, on top of being severely dehydrated. The blood was just my pissed off colon. Lack of electrolytes can do some pretty scary shit, pun intended. When I had migraine with aura for the first time, I didn't even know this was a thing. But it started with the worst migraine I ever had, followed by me losing my sight and becoming dizzy and feeling sick. I thought this was it. I told my sister that I thought I was gonna die. She told me she has those migraines too, brought me a pill specifically for these migraines, and told me to sleep. She stayed with me until I woke up just to be sure. Scary as hell. Car accident few months prior. Hit a stationary car on the highway going over 100 km/h. Wheels locked up due to slippery road. Thought it was over for me within that few seconds, but miraculously both me and the other person got out with minor injuries. Edit. Changed brake failed to wheels locked up due to road. Was wet, just for clarification, my bad. I woke up in the morning to get ready for work, bent to tie my shoe, and when I stood back up, the sight in my right eye was entirely gone. I did the usual thing of blinking and shaking my head a little, thinking maybe blood rushed to my head, weird, or whatever, but it wouldn't come back. I tried to explain to my partner that I was in trouble, but when I spoke, the wrong words kept coming out. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I definitely said tree instead of hospital at one point. I figured I was having a stroke or an aneurysm had ruptured, or something, brain tumory, who knows? Whatever the case, I spent the entire ride to the hospital crying and telling my partner over and over that I loved him. It felt like I couldn't say it enough. Turns out I was preparing for my first migraine. Cluster headaches. I do not recommend them, and the migraine aura I get is blindness and aphasia, because I'm a lucky girl like that, I guess. Very recently I had some kind of super fast virus or illness. Not sure what it was, but it basically started off with me feeling an incredible sense of impending doom, which I know is a sign for panic attacks. but I don't get panic attacks, and that feeling lasted until I started getting cold. Usually I'm way too warm, but this time I had to bundle up. That didn't work, and even getting into bed didn't help. I started shivering so hard my muscles began to tighten, and it was so painful I had to jump into the shower to stop it. But before I could get in I started getting lightheaded and had to lie down on the floor. It was like everything was spinning, and then I had the urge to shit and puke at the same time. Not being able to think clearly, I get into the tub in an attempt to do both just in case. At that moment I couldn't stand or coordinate properly, shivering, lightheaded, about to shit and puke. I thought to myself, I must be about to die and this is how I'll be found. I ended puking first, felt better enough to shit in proper place, and then showered to stop the shivering. After all of that it was like nothing happened, and I was better again. I have posted this before, but it was still pretty scary. I rode a really twisty roller coaster with my wife and the seatbelt didn't lock or let loose. I get on the coaster and sit with my wife. We hit the first little set of hills and my upper torso is flailing around like a tube that the air blows into at a used car lot. My wife is yelling and mad at me, thinking I'm doing it to be funny, but realizes that something went wrong. I hook my boots under the seat in front of me. We are both sweaty because it is hot. I'm trying to hook one of my arms on the lap bar. Thank God my wife has strong hands. She has played softball since she was 8 and played in college. She is freaking out trying to hold me in with the right arm. She pulled my watch off of my wrist, gripping my arm and hand. I'm worried that I'm going to get brained on one of the tunnels. Things slowed down. I had a bunch of images flash in my head. Shit, this is how I'm going to die. My wife grasping my sweaty arm, yelling my name, and I think she was yelling no over and over. At least I had a good run. I got married and have 2 great kids. They will be rich from the settlement of my death from being decapitated in one of their tunnels. We hit the end and I finally get to tell her that there was a malfunction and it wasn't me being the fun guy. I realize my watch is gone and she is pretty shaken from the whole thing. We get the watch and get out. She decided that no more coaster the rest of the day for me. I got hit by a car and lost consciousness for a few seconds. I remember the moment I saw the car, the moment I got hit, and had 1,000 thoughts going through my head, like in a dream. And then there I am in the middle of the road. I woke up and ran to the side of it as fast as I could. Little did I know I was running with a broken leg. As a child I would go bodyboarding at the beach, but only on our summer vacations. Being the excited child I was, I would swim for hours, and one of those times, I got super worn out from the surf and sun. I swam out to catch a wave, and was sitting there waiting for a good one. I laid down. I shut my eyes. Even though it must have been only a few minutes, though it seemed longer, I drifted far from the beach, way past where waves broke. To my child mind, it seemed more than a football field, but I'm sure it was not that bad. Nevertheless, I couldn't swim well enough to be out there alone. Thus, I promptly paddled in, scared as all get out. If I had fallen in or asleep, where would I have ended up? But this is the killer. Less than 10 miles up the coast there was a shark attack hours earlier. I also wonder if I would have been in one piece when I woke up. I had an emotional trauma-induced seizure. Basically your brain stops and reboots. I had this feeling of fading into a warmth. I saw a warm yellow light at first, but it all faded into a blackness. I remember thinking I don't know what's happening, but I think I'm about to die. I had a moment of reflection as I fell. I felt like I was being held by something calm telling me it may just be my time. I was 14. I took an edible before a flight from Portland to San Francisco. I proceed to get very high, both metaphorically and literally. The plane begins its descent, and as it does this, it seems to take a steeper angle than usual, and I notice the engines seemingly turn off or stop making as much noise. In my paranoid, stoned mind I become convinced that the engines have failed and we are going to crash. I begin composing my last texts to send out to my family and friends, saving them all as drafts, and then like 20 minutes later I notice that none of the flight attendants are worried at all and still smiling and joking. This is when I realized that the plane was not in fact crashing and I'm just an idiot. We had a lockdown at my school. Teacher didn't know what was going on. We heard a loud series of banging sounds as we huddled in the corner, and we all started texting our friends and family goodbye. I remember my mom sending me photos of our cat to try and help me stay calm. I can only imagine how terrifying it must have been for her. I really thought I was going to die. As it turned out, there was no real threat. It was a stupid prank. I don't know what the banging sound was, but it was probably chairs moving.